to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. This is part 2 in my New Mexico Ristra series, and in this video we're going to start adding the details and refining the chiles. If you're following along traditionally, check out part 1 in this series where I have a list of all the paint and canvas and the brushes that I use. The app that we're using is Infinite Painter for Android, and we're going to go ahead and continue refining the chiles. And so what I want to do now is go ahead and use a lighter red over the dark red for the chiles, and you can take a round brush for this step and just make short rough strokes and just make them in kind of chili shapes and leave some of the dark underneath, let it show out, and you can go ahead and just kind of make the edges stick out a little bit with the red color. And if you're following along traditionally, use cadmium red light or Grumbacher red, just kind of a bright red color. And I'm using the Angelo brush for this. And you can sort of adjust the texture for this and go ahead and use this set on the smudge brush. And what this does is it just kind of blends in the shapes of the chiles and softens the edges. And if you're doing this traditionally, then you need to go ahead and just smudge it with a paper towel or your finger. We just kind of want to get a soft, impressionistic look for the chiles. And so I'm just working on the overall mass and the shape, and then you can go back in with some of your darker red color again, and you can use cadmium red light mixed with burnt sienna if you're following along traditionally, or you can even use alizarin crimson for this. And just kind of go in and make some dark pockets in the chiles and use your photo reference and see where some of the dark pockets are and the shadows on the chile, and just kind of add some rough strokes in those areas, and then you can kind of blend it in again and just smudge it. We want to keep those edges kind of soft looking and kind of impressionistic looking. So just keep working on the edges and the overall shape of the chiles. We're not looking for any major details right now. We're just kind of still working on the shape of the overall Ristra. And so we don't want big details right now. But then we're starting to kind of pick and choose in places and individual places and refine the chiles just a little bit better here. And so you can go back in with some of your dark color and sort of make shapes of individual chiles. Now you're not going to be able to do every single chile unless you just take the photograph and you blow it up or something and really copy it, but for this, we don't really want to do that. We just kind of want to give the impression of individual chiles. And things in nature usually aren't that clear-cut anyway. I mean, if you look at the Ristra from a long ways off, you just see kind of masses of red and some highlights and things, and that's kind of what we want this to look like. So here I'm just adding another layer of red, and this is kind of a less orange red here. And if you're following along traditionally, probably use Grumbacher red with a little bit of white acrylic gesso. And that I use Grumbacher red because it seems to keep its red color a lot better, and it doesn't turn into a pink color as soon as some of the other colors like cadmium red light and things like that. So that's what I would use if I was doing this with my regular acrylics. So go ahead and make rough strokes again, just in chili shapes, and leave the dark pockets and let them shine through. And then here we want to start adding some highlights to the chilies. So we want a really light orange color, and use cadmium orange with white acrylic gesso if you're painting along with your acrylics. And we just kind of want to put just a little bit of the highlight on individual shapes, just to kind of give it a little bit of an individual shape. And what we want to do also is smudge it. We want this to look like a texture of the chilies, because the chilies are not always smooth, and the more they dry, the more wrinkled they're going to get. So you kind of want to smudge it and just use your smudge brush and Infinite Painter. And if you're following along traditionally, use your finger, use a paper towel, and you will also smudge them as soon as you lay down the stroke, because acrylics are fast drying. If you're doing oils, of course, then you can just do it like this and do it later. And so we just kind of want to give the idea of the texture of the chilies here, and then I'm adding a little bit of some lighter red in places, just trying to add some more highlights. And looking at my photo reference, it shows that some of the chilies are redder where the light is hitting them, so you want to try to give that look to your painting. And then I'm going back and refining the shapes a little bit more with alizarin crimson, a type of a dark red, sort of a brick red maybe, and just kind of trying to give the impression of more chili shapes. And again, you want to smudge these and make them soft looking, so that it gives the idea of the rough chili surface and the dried up wrinkle surface on your texture of your chilies. And the longer that these Ristras will hang, the more dried up the chilies will get, and they'll also get darker. So when you first put them up and you use bright red chilies, they look really, really bright red color, and then as they grow older, they're going to dry to a darker red color. And so that's okay to go ahead and add this darker red into the chili color. And so here then I want to go ahead and use the Angelo brush, and I just want to try to go ahead and add a little bit more highlight here. And I'm adding a little bit of some light yellow here and just putting it on the chilies and in different places. We don't want it in all of these because we're trying to add the final highlights here. So we're going to pick and choose certain chilies that the light hits the most and just kind of give them maybe a more defining shape. And so we want to work on that a little bit and smudge them out real good, because we want the surface of the chilies to look sort of wrinkled and gnarled and stuff. So I'm just going ahead and picking out the ones that are going to being hit by the light rays the most. And you can use kind of a light pink or a really light orange or a really almost yellow color. And then I'm switching back to the Leo brush, adding a little bit more bright red just to some of the chilies that are going to be right on the top, and that just kind of gives it a little bit more detail. And it just depends on how detailed you want this Ristra to look. You can leave it more painterly-like and more impressionistic-like. And to me, that kind of looks more realistic because, like I said, things in nature are not smooth and uniform. They're usually kind of rough and uneven. And so that just kind of makes it look more realistic to let it have a more painterly texture. But you can smooth them out. You can make it super detailed, but you have to be careful not to overwork it, because sometimes when you do that, it makes it look plasticky and it doesn't look real. So you kind of want it to have this rough texture. And then I'm just adding a few more highlights in an almost white color, a really light pink. And if you're following traditionally, you can use cadmium red light and a lot of white acrylic gesso and just kind of smudge those out, pick a few of the chiles and make them a little bit more detailed and leave some of the others kind of indistinct and vague looking, and that will just kind of show the depth sort of your Ristra. It will show the chiles on the top, and then it'll look like there's some further back on the bottom. And then here I'm working on the straw a little bit, and I switched to the sketch category, and I'm using a real small brush here, one of the pencils, and use a kind of a light yellow color, and then you can go back in with some of your brown just to kind of give it a little bit more of a straw look, and just kind of draw them out on the edge, give them a little bit more detail on the edge, but it doesn't have to be real detailed, because as you can see from the photo reference, it's just a mass of straw. And so anyway, this is the end of part 2 of my New Mexico Ristra series. And in part 3, we're going to be working more on the overhang of the porch and kind of detailing the pillar, the wooden pillar that's underneath the porch, and just adding a few more of the final details on the Ristra. So thanks everybody for watching. Thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below, and I will catch you later.